In Saigon and Honolulu, watch teams manning the war rooms wait throughout the weekend of March 3rd, expecting word that the anticipated communists' assault has been launched. From the communists' viewpoint, the weather conditions are ideal, and American intelligence reports indicate that the all-out attack should come early Monday morning. But it does not develop. Apparently, the communists are unable to mass their troops for the attack because of the airstrikes and heavy bombardment. Also, the Marines still control the high ground guarding the approaches to Sahn. Hills 881, 861, 950, and 558. So far, the enemy has been unable to take any of them. March 13th. This is the 14th anniversary of General Giap's attack on Dien Bien Phu, and time is running out for the communists. The Marines spend a relatively quiet day, waiting and watching.
As I reflect back on it, I can remember that the news stories coming out were talking about the agony of Sahn and so forth and so on. I'm reminded of the story of and I know this to be true because I was standing there, Italian newspaper man came in and went around the base for a little while, met a lot of people and talked to people, and then he come back over and he said, everybody you talk about the agony at Sahn. He says, I see no agony. He says, you got the apple, you got the orange. He says, but on the other hand, I don't see any ecstasy. And I think this is probably the way that all the men felt, that there was certainly no joy to it, but the agony, there was none. The morale was good and outstanding, and everybody had a job to do and did it.
Because of the resupply, we never ran out of sea rations. You could take a walk through the trench lines and the bunkers and find an array of menus being prepared. Some of them were quite elaborate. We just call them casseroles. Of course, these casseroles had various names. Several in particular that I remember were called Sahn Special. I think that was beef and chicken cooked stewed together. Another one was called Hippie's Delight. That was just about everything thrown in the pot together. And there was another one called Mulligan Stew. That was my specialty. I only had 3 meats in this type of stew. We beefed it up with hot sauce, meat sauce, and it was quite tasty.
March 26th, the enemy closes in, digging tunnels and working their trenches close to the base perimeter. 5 times they have probed the garrison's defenses, hitting the perimeter in battalion strength. But each time they're thrown back. The enemy is still unable to mass for the all-out attack. March 27th, the enemy has withdrawn one of his 2 divisions, and substantial elements have been withdrawn from a second North Vietnamese unit. Now the heavy U.S. bombing and airstrikes only heighten the desire of the remaining North Vietnamese troops to get out as the monsoon lifts and the weather clears. The Marines move out of their trenches and bunkers to seek and engage the enemy on the ground.
And on the 1st of April, the weather broke, and we were able to exercise our contingency plans by moving the 1st Cavalry Division, reinforced by a regiment of Marines, up Highway 9 to make a ground link-up. And the Marine engineers opened Highway 9, and we've been rolling trucks over it ever since.
These are the relief troops of Operation Pegasus, 30,000 men strong, a joint force composed of the 1st Air Cavalry Division of the U.S. Army and South Vietnamese troops. Sweeping down from the narrow highway from the north, they see little of the 2 North Vietnamese divisions that had surrounded the base. The enemy has left, silently pulled out and given up the battle, leaving in his wake a scarred and churned up landscape, blown up and destroyed bridges that must be rebuilt before the convoy can proceed. And and hidden mines that must be found and exploded. Fleets of helicopters lift men and artillery into the hills surrounding the base. And on April 7th, lead elements of the relief troops walk into the base at Sahn. The long siege is over.
It is my conservative estimate that 15,000 men were knocked out of action during that period of time. The result was that we broke his back, and he has not regained his strength since. We captured documents on the battlefield that attest to this. And we've learned from these documents that we not only killed a lot of the enemy and destroyed great quantities of his supplies, but we also made it so hot in that area that he was having great difficulty with desertion. Up to 20 to 25% of companies, according to these documents, deserted and just took off. And I think this is the first time in history where a siege of that magnitude has ever been broken by air power. But it was. And once it was broken by air power, and this was our strategy, it was exploited by a ground operation. But in fact, it had been virtually broken when the ground troops arrived.
The aerial bombardment of the North Vietnamese at Sahn was the most intense in the history of warfare. In all, from January 19th until March 31st, more than 103,000 tons of bombs were dropped on the besieging force. Navy, Air Force, and Marine pilots flew more than 24,000 sorties, including 2,500 by B-52. In addition, the enemy was pounded by more than 100,000 rounds of artillery and mortar fire. After Marine units moved out of Sahn into the surrounding terrain, they discovered hundreds of North Vietnamese bodies in shallow graves. Total enemy casualties for the period were estimated at more than 15,000. Marine losses were 204 killed and 1,622 wounded and evacuated. On May 23rd at the Air Force Base in Utapao, Thailand, General Westmoreland paid tribute to the B-52 crews who had supported the aerial bombardment throughout the siege.
You crews that manned the B-52, which have been part of the overall team, a professional team, but your contribution has been of the utmost importance, and we would not be in the posture today without what you have contributed.
On that same day, at the White House in Washington, D.C., the 26th Marine Regiment and its reinforcing units were cited by the President for their gallant fighting and countless acts of individual heroism in defending Sahn. Colonel David E. Lowndes, the commanding officer of the Marine Post, received the Navy Cross. And Sergeant Major A.W. Smith, senior enlisted Marine at the base, was awarded the Bronze Star.
Some have asked, what the gallantry of these Marines and airmen accomplished? Why did we choose to pay the price to defend those dreary hills? The fortress at Sahn straddled critical supply and infiltration routes that the North Vietnamese were using. Route 9, which it commanded, was to be a major avenue for the enemy into populated areas and into the cities of South Vietnam. By pinning down and by decimating 2 North Vietnamese divisions, the few thousand Marines and their gallant South Vietnamese allies prevented those divisions from entering other major battles, such as those for Hue and Quang Tri. I believe that our initiative toward talks with North Vietnam was greatly strengthened by what these men did at Sahn, for they vividly demonstrated to the enemy the utter futility of his attempts to win a military victory in the South. Brave men such as the 26th Marine will carry on the fight for freedom in Vietnam, and soon, God willing, they will come home. We would like nothing more than to see that day. But until they do, we shall express at moments such as these, on behalf of all our American people, our great gratitude for the protection they have given us and our great appreciation for their selfless bravery.
At Sahn today, the airstrip is deserted and the trenches and bunkers have long since been abandoned. The defenders have gone as the changing nature of a changing war imposes new requirements on military strategy. The battle that was fought here will now take its place in history. Perhaps someday historians will call it the